Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you to James Renton also for inviting me, and thank you to you all for being here. This is fantastic to be here in Edgehill, which is just up the road, but I've never been, so it's really great. Okay, so this paper basically arises out of a problem which I imagine is familiar to quite a few of us, and it's this problem of access to original source material and a lack within that source material, where it does exist, of the lives and stories of those people that are excluded from traditional written histories. Where these archives exist in my own area of expertise, which is Haiti, they tend to be produced, preserved, disseminated and controlled, ultimately controlled by illiterate urban elites focused in the urban centres of Haiti. They simply don't reflect the reality of groups outside of that elite, whether they be women, people that don't speak French, peasants, socially disadvantaged, rurally isolated groups. There's many, I guess we could call them subaltern groups, whose lives aren't reflected in these archives for whatever reason. And researching 19th century Haitian history has really meant confronting this problem head on. The surviving Haitian archives of this period are very fragile, they're difficult to access, they're scattered. Even once you get access to them, we don't find the stories there of the African-born majority of Haiti on independence in 1804 and their children, their descendants. Their lives aren't the concern, usually, generally speaking, of books, newspaper reports, diplomatic accounts of the period. Their participation in political life in Haiti is usually reduced to ciphers, the occasional group name or leader name that pops up, but nothing behind it to reflect the lives of so many other people behind the movements. So what I really, what I would like to do, which is a 19th century Haitian history that really takes into account this full participation of people across the country, that can trace how ideas spread, how political currents spread through society, is very, very difficult to do. Popular culture in rural Haiti is traditionally passed orally. Outside of the main urban centres of Haiti in the 19th century, there wasn't a regional newspaper press, so accessing these areas through newspaper archives is very difficult as well. We've got this situation of an imbalance of information, and news in the provinces was generally passed by word of mouth. In Creole, it's called the téléjol. It's like the grapevine. This can also include underground organising against the state, which for obvious reasons wouldn't be wanting to leave a written trace, is passing under the radar and therefore passing out of the historical record through its oral nature. So this paper really conceptualises this problem of popular invisibility and elite dominance in 19th century Haiti as a series of barriers. These barriers acted in the past to impede popular participation in politics, and they're still acting now to impede our retrospective understanding of how those processes are really working. And I want to try and find ways of overcoming these barriers. First, I want to, in keeping with the theme of the seminar series this season, which is obviously borders and boundaries, I really wanted to look at the actual physical barriers which are existing in 19th century and try and conceptualise how they're impeding popular participation. So first of all, I'll look at the construction of a network of fortifications throughout the entire geographical span of Haiti in the first decade of the 19th century. I'll look at the construction of an internal border that cuts the country in half just a few years after independence in 1804, splitting it into a kingdom in the north and a republic in the south. I'll look at the border with the Dominican Republic, what is now the Dominican Republic, so a border that cuts the islands in half from west and east. And I'll also look at internal boundaries that attempt to keep workers, this is in a post-slavery Caribbean society, don't forget, keeping workers on the plantation working for the state, not in a situation of slavery, but borders that try to restrict the free movement of peasants within that society post-independence and post-slavery. These are all obviously quite contested spaces in 19th century Haiti, and they all have this huge impact on the lives of people in that society at the time, keeping people in, keeping people out, the way that the borders are working in these two senses. And of course, they also act as barriers to the effective transmission of information. state propaganda gets across these borders, and in fact state propaganda is blasted across borders, both internal and external. But again, we have this problem of not being able to access the lives of the rural black African-born or Creole-born majority. So strategies for reading into the sources that we have, trying to reread the sources we have in different ways, find new sources. This is the second phase of my paper, the more exploratory phase, I guess. My current research project at Liverpool is focusing on the problem of anti-slavery thought in Haiti after it became independent. I'm really interested in looking at how abolitionist currents continue to circulate in Haiti. Slavery is finished in Haiti at this point, but the idea of anti-slavery, how does it persist in 19th century Haiti? And again, I don't want to just know what the elite are doing about this idea of anti-slavery. I want to know how it's impacting on the whole of the society. And of course, it's going to involve some detective work. And it's led me to become interested in the kinds of barriers which, again, are disallowing the majority of Haitians from participation in this discourse of anti-slavery. And I've been doing research in urban centres, Port-au-Prince, Paris, London, New York. And of course, as it might be expected, the results which have been thrown up by this are things like official speeches, proclamations, debates on abolitionism, newspaper reports, elite dinner party toasts to Wilberforce and the end of slavery across the world, state funerals. The Haitian government held state funerals for very famous abolitionists like John Brown, the US abolitionist. Correspondence between anti-slavery leaders of anti-slavery movements abroad and Haitian leaders. So this is all happening at quite a sort of high-level diplomatic level. And in response, I found quite a lot of material for this project, right? And in response to this wealth of information, I question in my research whether this 19th century elite can be seen as what's known as the city on the hill, so a sort of exemplary force for the black-led abolitionist movement, internationally speaking, or whether, as the historian Philippe Girard has said, Haiti's support for global abolitionism was, he calls it, minor. But perhaps in taking this elite-dominated approach to understanding the Haitian politics of anti-slavery, maybe I've actually been approaching the problem from the wrong angle. What would a popular anti-slavery politics in Haiti look like at this time? What would its goals be? What did the Haitian people think of the abolitionist interest in their country? And how was the idea of slavery understood by those people? People who had themselves been slaves and their descendants. What is sort of family history of slavery, really, that you're looking at here? How was slavery understood? How was its opposite conceptualized? How was freedom conceptualized in this society? As an aside, this assertion by Girard that Haiti played a minor role in global abolitionism is quite a striking example of what the Haitian historian Michel Rose-Trouillot has called a discourse of banalization surrounding the Haitian Revolution. According to Girard, after 1804, Haiti's leaders, I quote, occasionally attacked nearby Santo Domingo or offered asylum to a few Latin American revolutionaries, but they never masterminded a slave revolt anywhere. So clearly he's understating his case for effect here. I mean, Haiti's leaders actually spent over half a century repeatedly invading the eastern side of the island, Santo Domingo. Haiti controlled that entire territory for over 20 years in the 19th century and permanently abolished slavery throughout the island during that period. Those few Latin American revolutionaries that Girard dismisses were actually Francisco de Miranda and Simón Bolívar. For people that know Latin American history, they're not really minor. They both came to Haiti, sought refuge there, and used the country as a base to get back to Venezuela. In exchange for arms and financial support, Alexandre Pétion, who was the president of Haiti at the time, asked Bolívar to abolish slavery throughout Latin America. This Bolívar eventually did, although quite partially and gradually. So Haiti's role in not only abolishing slavery directly in the Dominican Republic, but also indirectly aiding the abolition of slavery throughout Spanish-speaking Latin America is in the history books. Anyway, the second part of his assertion that Haiti never masterminded a slave insurrection anywhere is perhaps more worthy of consideration. We can see that the Haitian state in the 19th century, as I was saying, practiced this elite-led, top-down form of abolitionism, that consisted of this correspondence with British and American abolitionists, British, American, French abolitionists, and maintaining legal abolition in their own territories. But what about slave-led resistance, so sort of bottom-up participation? What was the response of the Haitian government to slave-led resistance in the rest of the Americas? What role did individual Haitians play, if any? And this has really been debated by researchers quite recently, and they've found very clear traces of influence of the Haitian Revolution on slave-led revolts in the rest of the Americas, but less clear evidence for direct involvement by Haiti itself. In 1804, the leader Jean-Jacques Dessalines spoke out against slavery in the neighbouring French colony of Martinique. He expressed a wish to, I quote, fly to the assistance of those in slavery in Martinique and break their fetters. There was a plot the following year, and historians have looked into this, apparently sanctioned by Dessalines, to use the island of St. Thomas in the Caribbean as a base to invade Martinique and Guadeloupe and therefore spread the Haitian Revolution, stir up slave revolts there. Historians have differed on how accurate the involvement of Dessalines in this revolt was. I mean, Deborah Jensen suggests there's not usually this much smoke without fire. However, Julia Gaffield, a new scholar of Haiti, has found archival evidence suggesting that maybe this was the French that were kind of exaggerating the threat in order to get some military backup there. So historians have differed in their approach to this. Generally speaking, perceptions of Haiti's influence in the Atlantic world were being distorted by the fears of the white planter, making this quite difficult to understand what's actually going on during this period. This Haitian fear pushed ruling European colonial powers and the United States to respond to the threat of Haiti as it was at the time, and they responded by putting in place an economic blockade against Haiti. This was in place by 1806, and it did significant damage to Haiti's economy and Haiti's trade prospects. And I think we can really consider this blockade as being one of the barriers to participation, one of the barriers to civil participation of the Haitian masses. By reducing the number of ships that were able to trade with Haiti, it reduced the chances for local producers to get a good price for their goods, thereby maintaining them in rural poverty. They weren't able to accumulate capital, basically. It also forced Haiti into a position of illegality and illicit trading. It encouraged corruption, it encouraged dodgy dealing. This all benefited the elites of Haiti, but it didn't have a trickle-down effects to the rural producers, basically. In the meantime, France imposed a debt of 150 million francs on Haiti. It offered Haiti the means to pay the debt through high-cost loans, so this sort of typical neo-colonial politics, but happening quite early on in the 19th century. The economist Victor Bulmer-Thomas has said, I quote, "There's no doubt that Haiti faced an extraordinarily hostile external environment in the 19th century. So we've got blockades, low income, debt, loan repayments, all combining to create quite a weak economy that was very vulnerable to global economic crisis." So this hostile environment in the Caribbean in the 19th century made it very difficult for Haiti to intervene elsewhere to end slavery. Haiti had to, instead of going on the offensive elsewhere, Haiti had to remain on the defensive to protect its own borders. And thus in the 1805 Constitution, it's written in, Haiti promises, I quote, "not to disturb the peace and interior administration of foreign colonies," i.e. we won't intervene in we won't intervene to end slavery elsewhere. So this is the official policy in the Constitution. With this in place, Dessalines and the other revolutionary generals turned their attention to creating a network of fortifications across the country to protect Haiti from foreign invasion. As we'll see, it was built at the cost of the rural majority in Haiti. So this is this idea of Haiti as a fortified nation when it declared independence in 1804. We're going to examine this network of about 30 forts across the country, spanning the country, and they were all built more or less during the first decade of independence, mostly under Dessalines' rule, so from 18 1804 to 1806. And I've got some pictures. This is Dessalines. So Dessalines' new strategy of defence for Haiti represented quite a clear departure from the colonial policy of building naval forts. Dessalines built inland. He went into the rural heart of Haiti. In April 1804, he ordered the massacre of the remaining French prisoners in Haiti. It was basically intended as a dire warning. He said, he travelled across Haiti in person to see it done, and said, "Our daggers are sharpened, your punishment is ready. 60,000 men, equipped, inured to war, obedient to my orders, burn to offer a new sacrifice to the names of their assassinated brothers. Let that nation come who may be mad or daring enough to attack me." So this is a real provocation to the French to say, basically, if you're mad enough, come and attack us. And the plan, of course, was to retreat from the coast, to go inland into the mountains where the French would find it very difficult to follow. It's a kind of scorched earth tactics, basically, intended to burn all the cities on the coast, destroy all the potential provisions or any kind of aid the French might find, retreat inland into this chain of fortifications which he built in the mountains in the centre of Haiti. The strategy was laid out in this 1805 constitution. I quote, "At the first cannon shot, the cities are destroyed, the nation is on its feet." The nation gets on its feet, marches inland to the fortifications. The Haitian Institute for National Heritage, ISPAN, has identified and mapped 27 of these fortresses spanning a chain across the country, and it's described in their bulletin, I quote, as the most formidable and astonishing network of fortifications in the Americas, end quotation. They're all in the mountains, quite remote, some of them near to towns and cities, but many of them very remote. Henri Christophe, who was one of the generals of the revolution, oversaw the command of the fortification building in the north of Haiti, including a Fort Drouet. And there's some pictures of Fort Drouet there. All of these fortresses come from this fantastic website called mappinghaitianhistory.com. It's got all the ruins of the plantations, pictures of all the fortresses and everything. It's great. So this is Drouet in the north. Henri Christophe also led on the construction of forts called Sans Quartier, which means no mercy or kill them all. Brave, Le Redoutable, the fearsome, and his most famous construction, which is now on the UNESCO World Heritage List, which is known as the Citadelle. And there's a picture of the Citadelle there. It's an absolutely incredible fortress. Two fortresses in the north were built under the leadership of François Capois. There's a picture of him on the website for this seminar series. He was known as Capois la Mort, or Capois Death. And he built two fortresses, trois pavillons, 3 flags, and rally points. In the mountains above the capital, Port-au-Prince, 2 interlinked forts were built with a tunnel between them, and Alexandre Pétion oversaw their construction. They were called Fort Jacques and Fort Alexandre, after Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Alexandre Pétion. He named them after himself and Dessalines. These fortresses were damaged in the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. You can see the rubble in the left-hand picture there, but they're currently being restored as a tourist attraction in Haiti. Dessalines himself oversaw his masterpiece, the centre of this network of fortifications. He created a new capital inland. He called it it was previously called Marchand. He called it Marchand Dessalines, and he built a network of 6 fortresses around the city, all perfectly constructed to have perfect sight lines between them. And some pictures again there. The 6 fortresses were named Décidé, determined, Innocent, named after his son, Madame, speculatively named after his wife, Doko, that's the smallest one, but I don't know what it means. It's, I think, a Creole word. Culbuté, which means kicked out, and Fin du Monde, the end of the world. And Fin du Monde was the furthest fortress away from the city. So while the objective of Dessalines in ordering this complete reconceptualization of Haitian territory in the early days of national independence were military and strategic rather than social, I want to consider the implications, the social implications of this policy for all of the citizens of Haiti, whether they considered themselves as such or not. These people had, at least the ones that weren't born in Africa, the Creole citizens, had grown up in a society where the centre of civilization was the capital, the coast, and ultimately the ships that were coming and going, from bringing news from France, bringing fashions from France. And what I was wondering what the impact on Haiti might be of suddenly having the attention of the new elite focused inland on the most remote, rural, mountainous parts of the country. Because these mountains are described by one of the national historians of Haiti as, I quote, the boulevard of freedom and national independence. They were known as the home of fugitive slaves escaping the plantation and maroon communities. There we go, the mountains of Haiti. For many, the new attention drawn to these areas must have been unwelcome. The maroon communities and the African rebel groups who lived there did not submit to either the colonial authority or the authority of the new Haitian state. And throughout the revolution and the war for independence, many of these groups remained completely separate. They never really joined the Revolutionary Army, or they joined in part. They joined strategically to fight for their own interests. Sometimes they fought tactically for the French, sometimes they fought tactically against the French. And they drew forces away from the main offensive of the revolutionaries. In 1803, Dessalines singled out a West Central African maroon leader called Lamour d'Hérens as an enemy of the revolution. D'Hérens led thousands of his supporters into battle against the Revolutionary Army, not with them. And instead of the military formation and grades that the revolutionaries favoured, these African armies were grouped by their origins. They had regiments or sort of groups of Aradas, Congos, Ibos, Mandingos. This is a sketch of the Revolutionary Army from the time. I don't have any pictures of the African regiments, sadly. So Dessalines' decision in 1804 to build in the heart of Haiti meant going into conflict with these groups, going into conflict again with these armed groups. And again, it sort of drew attention to the lack of unity within the new state. There's profound multiple divisions at this point in Haiti between the new state and the people, between urban and rural, between black and mixed race, between Creole and African-born, who were also called Bossal or Congo, between former slaves and former free people. There's so many divisions going on already at the time. And even for the people who were supporters of the revolution, or at least non-partisan, the arrival of the state in this rural hinterland meant had an impact on their lives. It meant labour, the construction of these fortresses. It meant military service for those who'd already fought through the revolution. The state rhetoric really focused on the male revolutionary and soldier. There's been work by historian Mimi Scheller on the male revolutionaries. She's called it sword-bearing citizens. And there's some correspondence from Henri Christophe that survived in the archives of the University of Florida that gives us an insight into what's going on during the period where all these fantastic fortress networks were constructed. Henri Christophe writes to one of his generals, I quote, "Send me all the women who know how to make bricks," in 1805, and another one sent to get building materials from the ruins of the plantations in order to construct the citadel, this masterpiece of a fortress. Christophe's letters also give us an insight into what he's doing to combat these African-born enemies within, he calls them. Many of the leaders of the Haitian post-1804 Haitian society were also Voodoo leaders. They were military leaders, but they were also Voodoo leaders. And so anyone associated with what they call caprolata, which is kind of sorcery, or magicians, magic, anyone associated with anything like that is automatically suspected of being a potential rival or a potential military enemy. And that goes right up the chain of commands. And in a letter to Capois Lamour, one of these key generals, Christophe wrote to him accusing him of practicing voodoo, of having held an inverted midnight mass with all the crosses turned upside down and the images turned upside down. He retracted the accusation, but it shows the extent to which enemies were seen on all sides. Even within the revolutionary leadership, they were seeing enemies on all sides. But Capois had quite an important role post-revolution. He was entrusted with the northeastern border with Santo Domingo, so this real key strategic space. There we go. You can see the border there on the map between west and east. And this was obviously a very vulnerable border zone. It was open to potential French spies. It sheltered maroon groups. Christophe wrote to Dessalines. He visited Ouanaminthe, which is the town in the red dot there. He dispatched a battalion there with instructions to set fire to any huts, or ajoupas he calls them, and send their inhabitants back to the local military commander. He told Capois-Lamour to patrol the border, stop any trading going across it, burn all the settlements again. So reading between the lines of these letters, we can see the efforts of the African-born people to re-establish some kind of domestic life after the upheaval of revolution, and then Christophe and Dessalines' efforts to try and recapture them into the military effort to defend the whole country. So the local versus the national kind of efforts that's going on here. There's a historian of the Haitian majority, a historian of the rural majority of Haiti called Gérard Barthélemy, and he has quite an interesting insight into what is going on with this group, what their aims are after the revolution. He says basically for this group, the revolution was, freedom meant for them, I quote, in its final and simple brutality, the destruction of a whole system. Their interest in participating in the Haitian Revolution was completely to destroy the plantation system. And their understanding of freedom was the complete opposite of the plantation system. And this really came into conflict with the elite on independence, because the elite took possession of the remaining colonial infrastructure and they attempted to use it to secure independence through trying to revive some of the plantation system and also building these military fortresses. So both the elite and these, what are called the outside people, the moun en dehors, both of them partially succeeded and partially failed in their goals after 1804. The elite succeeded in taking possession of these sites. However, they failed to put into practice any real idea of unity in the territory. It's splintering into different groups. The black majority succeed in creating what Jean Casimez called a counter-plantation system. Gradually but profoundly, the Haitian people reshaped the agricultural network into the agricultural landscape. They reshape it into a network of family-owned plots, small plots called Lacu, which is kind of the equivalent of the yard in the Anglophone Caribbean. These plots produced goods for sale at markets. They also produced goods for export. And they were a success story in the 19th century. They were a creolized, African-inspired collective way of living that offered an alternative to the large-scale plantation model, offered protection to the families within the small structure, and often a reasonably comfortable standard of living. But the black majority, while they managed to construct these Lacu, failed to exert any real political power on the national level, which was being controlled by the elite. So you get a profound division between state and nation, as the name of the book by Yannick Urban says. It's between state and nation. The majority don't recognise the state. The state failed to exercise control, tried to, but failed to exercise control over the majority. And neither group really quite succeeds in imposing their vision of what Haiti ought to be on the rest of the country. I'm going to have to speed up, I think. So basically, after... we have two leaders of Haiti that emerge after Dessalines' death in 1806. Henri Christophe on the left and Alexandre Pétion on the right. And it splits into north and south. There's a civil war, and then an internal border is created, and two states are essentially created. And both north and south produce quite a lot of propaganda against each other, accuse each other of either collaborating with the French or being tyrannical, they both call each other's leaders usurpers and tyrants. The South accuses, the southern propagandists accuse Christophe of making slaves of his northern subjects. Henri Christophe, the leader of the North, continued to put into place these defensive strategies in his own kingdom. So he's protecting the borders of Haiti. He's also now protecting another border, which is the border against the South. Christophe wrote a general plan for the defence of the kingdom, published in 1814. He called for a defence system in harmony with our local geography. He was basically planning to follow the same methodology of as Dessalines in defending the country. So burn the cities, burn any infrastructure, retreat to the mountains, and lead a guerrilla war from there. His general plan, which was intended to be read in every village every Sunday to the assembled people, insisted on the importance of continued agricultural production. The militarised agricultural forces, which would be made up mainly of women and children because the men would be fighting, would sow new plantations and plant provisions in the mountains. And the generals were in charge of making, I quote, each individual Haitian feel the necessity of contributing with all his strength and capacity to the defence of the common cause. Henri Christophe eventually, in ill health and threatened by mutiny, killed himself in 1820. And the southern president, who'd become, in the meantime, Jean-Pierre Boyer, took control of the entire territory. The border was technically erased by the reunification of the country, but it was still very present in the national consciousness, and the new president tactically crossed it very quickly. He embarked on a tour of the entire country in 1821. He said in a speech, "Not to conquer, but to conciliate and pacify." I'm going to skip a bit. Okay, so that was the border between north and south. I was going to say to you that the memory of Henri Christophe in Haiti today is kind of mixed, I suppose. This is his monument in Port-au-Prince. He's remembered on the one hand for his military exploits. You can see him in his general's uniform. His ambitious building programs, you can see all of the construction going on. And he's remembered for his support for education, which you can see on the bottom left, some children with books. But he's also remembered for subjecting the people in his kingdom to hard labour, in building the fortresses, which you can see on the right-hand side. And this is another fresco from his monument. On the top right-hand corner, you can just see the word esclave written in French, so slaves. Basically, these are slaves. That's what the graffitist is saying. Okay, so one major international border has been erased by Boyer. He then turns his attention to the border with the east side of the country, which is Santo Domingo, the Spanish side. This is the border with the Spanish side, depicted a whole century later. This is a 20th century photo. So a rebellion against Spanish colonial rule, as well as support for Haiti among the slaves in Santo Domingo, enabled Boyer to invade with the Haitian army and take over the whole of what is now the Dominican Republic, so both sides of the island, in 1822. This had been something that the Haitians always wanted to do. Toussaint Louverture tried to do it, Dessalines tried to do it. Finally, Boyer succeeds. And the reason they wanted to do it was, first of all, territorial. When Haiti gained its independence, at that time, France controlled the whole island. Therefore, for the Haitians, they now control the whole island. So it's seen as part of their territory, and that's written into the Constitution. Secondly, clearly, there's a strategic issue. If they've got slave-owning enemies right on their border within the same territory, it's going to be a constant problem. It's going to be a constant threat. So for the security of the new state, ideally, they wanted to unify the territory. And then the question of slavery as well. Slavery still continued in Santo Domingo, whereas the Haitian constitution said, I quote, "slavery is forever abolished." And actually, during the period when the French sent the remains of their colonial administration and their army to Santo Domingo, and they were there as a kind of shadow colony for 5 years after emancipation. And from there, they encouraged the Spanish colonists in Santo Domingo to kidnap Haitians from across the border into slavery. So there's a kind of actual active threat going on there as well. Slavery continued on that side of the island. In a text published in 1817, the northern writer, Baron de Vasty, describes a group of Haitian and Dominican workers meeting at the border, working together, buying and selling goods in the marketplace, and then separating at the end of the day. The Haitians marching off to their side of the border, singing songs and beating drums, whereas the Dominicans, I quote, "dancing gravely to the sound of their guitars, return to slavery on their side of the border." So this Spanish border is really quite a problematic space in this national consciousness of early Haiti. It's present in reality, but theoretically it's absent. It's not in the Constitution. And these guitars and drums couldn't ultimately harmonise across the border, but the labour on both sides is actually taking place in real life and is key to defining these cross-border relationships. When Boyer took control of the East and unified the whole territory, he extended the abolition of slavery to the eastern side of the island and placed the Dominicans under the same labour laws as the Haitians, which caused all kinds of problems in the East. The famous rural code of Boyer made law across the new territory, basically controlled the flow of labour through internal borders, kept the peasants in the rural spaces, kept the urban spaces separate, didn't allow peasants to move freely between these internal borders. Agricultural labourers had to stay on the land where they were that they were tied to, weren't allowed to resettle in urban areas unless they got special permission from the magistrate of the rural district. Those who couldn't prove other employment were obliged to cultivate the land because agriculture was a protected area of interest of the states. An encouragement prize was set up to be awarded to the grower of the best produce in Haiti. So they're doing everything they can really to encourage agricultural production. It's seen really as key state interest here. But what they're trying to do, what the elite is trying to do with this code is make a link between hard work and freedom, basically. It's conceptual principles to unite the whole island. Boyer, in a speech, suggested that the Spanish side has existed in stagnation, he called it, before Haiti annexed it. He said, because of this stagnation, the inhabitants of the East would only attain by degrees the prosperity that is the fruit of liberty and independence. So you'll get there eventually, but it's going to take some time because slavery has inhibited prosperity in the eastern side of the islands, according to Boyer. And he promised that the former slaves of Santo Domingo would gradually be integrated into the national community of Haiti through work and through industry, basically, through prosperity. To finish then, I just want to return to this problem of the absence of the peasantry from the archives. These people known as the mun onde, or the outside people, which is all in itself really suggests this kind of barrier between rural and urban Haiti, the outside people, the outsiders. I just want to ask some questions really. I mean, can we use the existing archives in different ways? Can we find new archives? Can we tap into oral tradition, religious tradition, in order to shed new light on this group? Many of the borders to participation that actively affected this social group, so lack of physical access to the sites of power, internal borders stopping their movements, economic problems, language barriers, because French was the official language, most of the peasants didn't speak French. These problems had an impact throughout the 19th century and well beyond. And in my work, what I'm really trying to do at the moment is find ways of bridging this gap. And one of the ways that I've found, that I will very quickly in 5 minutes try and show you, is through a 19th century diplomatic source. I found this source in the diplomatic archives in Paris. Diplomatic sources exist. We know about diplomatic sources for 19th century Haiti. One of them, Spencer St. John, a British diplomat, was responsible for one of the most negative, racist portrayals of Haiti that we've ever really come across. The diplomats these diplomatic sources were very, very problematic in many ways, but this source that I found in the French diplomatic archives he's similar but also quite different in some interesting ways. He allows us maybe to try and tap into the rural world of these outside people. And the reason that he allows us to do that is because he had a post not in the capital, Port-au-Prince, but in the rural areas of Haiti, in a place called Gonaïves, a small city called Gonaïves. He was a minor diplomatic official. He had this minor position, and he was quite bored, I think, in his small diplomatic posting. So what he did was write an 800-page manuscript detailing the lives of the people who lived next door to him. And those people lived in what was known as a Lacu, which is the yard, right? It's the groupings of these Haitian peasants in the 19th century. And he drew pictures. He wrote all the names down of all the people that lived in this Lacu and their relationships between each other. He copied letters that he'd found between. It's a quasi-anthropological account of the house next door, and it's a fascinating source. It's a very problematic source because into this account, inevitably, he's writing his own bias, his own racism, his own sexism. I mean, the way that he writes about Haitian women is very, very problematic. But the social framework of the Lacu that he's working within, I mean, we can see the houses of these outside people. We've already encountered them. They were being burned by Henri Christophe when he set up his fortification network. Basically, what you got was the land and the work were shared by an extended family. The family lived in a number of houses around a central courtyard. They create their own social organisational structures. Gérard Barthélemy has written about this theoretically in his book about rural Haiti. He says that the way that Haitians protected themselves from ever being enslaved again after 1804 was to instigate a society where there is no position of leadership at all. There's no hierarchy, and nobody is set above anyone else, so it has to be a completely equal society. And the way that they ensure that happens, some of the ways that they ensure that happens is through not having a master and a servant kind of relationship, but through having a relationship where everybody in one house goes to work on the land of somebody, then they all go and work on the land of somebody else, so that the people move between the collective land ownerships working on each one. So a kind of collective work situation. Births, unions and deaths take place within that community. The presence of tombs on the land cements the ancestral and religious connection to the land, and that connection to the land is very sort of spiritually important. The practice of voodoo is central to this community organisation, and the practice of magic is also central to its organisation, in that if you can keep everyone equal, if someone tries to get above someone else, the way that they're brought back down is often through the use of what we could call magical practices. And Prax is this diplomat, this French diplomat whose work has survived in this French diplomatic archive. He explains his methodology in a letter. He writes, this is 1853, so we've moved on a bit in time. He writes that the most successful collectors of popular culture are, I quote, those who familiarise themselves with the working classes by going into poor homes, those who live in villages, who learn the language of the country, who listen to old legends, who mingle with the crowds in public events, etc. And he says that living in this small town has really revealed Haiti to him, so he's interested in Haiti. There's only about 5,000 inhabitants at the time, so it's a small town. This is his drawing. This is his drawing of the house next door, or a house, he calls that. We can compare it with photos and drawings and photos of Haitian peasantry and see that it's kind of similar, although it has got a sort of flourish on the top, but the structure of it is similar. So he's describing the social structure. There's a list of all the inhabitants of the courtyard, the Lacu next door. He writes a lot about Haitian women, I said, and his own prurient curiosity and peddling of stereotypes about black women really influence what he calls la vérité, the truth, which is the title of his chapter about women, which is there, and this sort of slightly coy sketch to illustrate it. And Prax, like other European visitors to Haiti, is horrified by the low take-up of marriage, and instead this situation called plaçage, which is like an unofficial union. So the list of the inhabitants of the Lacu, he describes 8 as mixed race, 11 as black. The men are mainly fishermen. It's a town by the sea. One is a cobbler, another's a legal clerk. The women are mainly housewives, laundry women. One sells tafia, which is rum. The Lacu is part owned by some of its inhabitants. One of the fishermen owns a third of the property. The others are maybe living with family, and at least 2 of the 7 are linked by family ties. Prax includes some sketches, as I said, of local Haitians in his manuscript, although he doesn't say who they are. There we go, and he includes lots of gossip. He includes some song lyrics. He talks about how songs are really important in understanding popular politics and popular participation in politics in rural Haiti. And one of the songs, for me, is really interesting. It's called Citoyen Schwelcher, Citizen Schwelcher. Schwelcher is a French abolitionist who visited Haiti about a decade before this. And for me, it's really interesting because is an evidence, the only evidence I've found so far, of a popular response to European abolitionism, to European anti-slavery. And it's a very interesting song because the popular response to abolitionism basically focuses on Schwelche's suggestion to promote the take-up of marriage. He was one of these European visitors who was terribly horrified that no one was married in Haiti. And he suggested that the Haitian state should legislate to make marriage almost obligatory for couples that have been together a long time. And I've copied the lyrics of the song, some pictures of... Oh, have I copied the lyrics of the song? I thought I had. Oh well, I'll just tell you the lyrics of the song. In the song, women are said to be waiting at the window desperately for this legislation to get passed. It says marriage is their bread and butter, whereas for men, this legislation's depicted as an unwelcome form. They call it conscription. So it's like being forced by the state. Yet again, these poor men are being forced by the state into doing something that they want to do. Either they're being forced into agriculture, forced into the army, or they're being forced into marriage, in this case, with the abolitionists. So the abolitionists are portrayed in this thing as being part of the state. They're being portrayed as nothing of any great interest to the people other than their impact on this question of marriage. And the final verses of the song show how marriage is actually good for neither men nor women at the end of the day. And the song is dated by its mention of Victor Schwelcher. He visited in 1841. I need to finish now, basically. I really wanted to talk about Voodoo and this a little bit more about that, and that's one potential source that we can use in helping us reconstruct the lives of these outside people, these outsiders in Haitian society, who are actually the majority of Haitians, and push beyond the boundaries of the archive here. Images, again, because in the 19th century we don't have access to photographic images, but suddenly we get this radical transformation at the turn of the 20th century. New images start emerging, these kind of images, 1920s, anthropological images, and a wealth of images of the Haitian peasantry start emerging and even start to become a kind of visual cliche. The women carrying loads on their heads, for example. Prax is a kind of early participant in this kind of othering image, as we see in that La Vérité sketch, the truth. His sketches kind of draw us in through their level of detail, but also make us aware of their limitations, basically. And that sort of brings us back again, kind of rudely, to the limitations of these 19th century sources and how far we can trust Prax as an observer of this kind of society. How much is he really understanding? How much is he conveying to his reader? Etc. And a historian, just to finish now, the historian called Julia Gaffield has described Haiti's borders in the early 19th century as semi-permeable, and I think that's quite an interesting image to finish on. Some things are coming through, some things are going out, but how much of that can we really seize, and what's our relationship to it? How can we understand the development of revolutionary politics at a grassroots level? How can we see the impact of these military policies, agricultural policies on the people of Haiti? And that's it, basically. Thank you very much.